Alright, welcome back. Simply put, I want to create a power-up for our game. And I want the power-up to make our player object invisible for a certain amount of time. While the power-up is in effect, I want our player object to be able to phase through our obstacles instead of being collided with them. To keep everything nice and tidy, let's create another script, a fifth script. This time, our script is gonna handle our power-up spawning behavior. So, for a fitting name, we should call it PowerUp Manager, I guess. That works. Then we need to create a prefab for our power-up. Because we want it to have multiple instances. We're gonna have it spawn gradually throughout our map. So we can't just have one of it. Let's just create a cube. Then make a material for it. Let's make this one green. But you can make it any color. And then we're gonna turn this into a prefab by dragging it into our prefabs folder. We don't need to give our power-up object a rigid body. A collider is enough. And that's because for two objects to collide with each other, it's enough for only one of them to have a rigid body. Not both of them have to have a rigid body. So now that we have our power-up prefab, let's get into our power-up manager script and begin coding. We want to assign our power-up prefab. So first, public game object power-up prefab. Then we need a timer for our spawning. So let's write private float. Let's call it power-up interval. We're gonna make it 10 seconds. Then we need the boundaries. We need boundaries because we don't want the power-up to accidentally spawn in here. Or maybe right here, or maybe all the way to here. We need to make it so our power-up only spawns in our map, not outside of it. For that, we're gonna use the bounds that we used in our previous video. These are the limits of our map, the edges. So we're gonna start with writing private float min x 21 3. Then private float max x 2 3. Then we're going to do the same for z-axis values. Min b. Shit. Alright. We don't have a bounds for our y-axis, but we also need to add a y value to our bounds. Actually, do we need to? No, I don't think so. That's enough. Next, let's create a method that will help us spawn our power-up. A new method. It should be called spawn power-up. Then we need to call this call this method repeatedly. For example, we call this method, then 10 seconds passes, and then we call this method again. To do that, we'll add a new method called invoke repeating. You can see in its definition that says invokes the method name in time seconds, then repeatedly every repeat rate seconds. And here's our line. So let me tell you how this works. After 2 seconds, our invoke repeating method will start working. And when it starts working, every 10 seconds, it will call the spawn PowerUp method. Now that we got that out of the way, let's use our bounds to start spawning in on our PowerUp. With every call of our spawn PowerUp methods, we need to set a random position. So to do that, we'll write vector3 position, and then we'll write new vector3. First, we need to use our min x and max x values by random range. Min x, then max x. This will pick a value between min x and max x. Then we're gonna do the same for our z values. Random range, min x, min z, and max z. Then finally we need our y value, which is, let's check our player object, which is 0.89, 86. Let's copy that and then put it here. We got the power-up's position ready, so now all we need to do is actually spawn in on our power-up. We're gonna use the instantiate method. First, we're gonna give our instantiate method what prefab we want to spawn, and that is our power-up prefab. Then we need to give it a position, which is our position right here. Then we need to give it Cartesian identity, which basically means no rotation. So let's add that. Okay. And I think that's it. So let's save our PowerUp Manager script and go back to our editor. First, just like we did in our menu manager, we need an empty project for our PowerUp Manager. Did I say empty project? I meant empty object. But anyway, PowerUp Manager. We're gonna drag this script into our PowerUp Manager. And then we need to fill this slot, PowerUp Prefab. So to do that, we'll go back to our prefabs folder, pick our PowerUp, and then drag it into the slot. Now, I think that's all for the spawning mechanism, so let's try to test it to see if everything is working well. And there it is. Though that is not expected, I don't want that. I don't want our power-ups to collide with our obstacles. Let's fix that by doing the same thing we did to prevent our obstacles from colliding with each other. First, let's create a new layer for our power-up. We're gonna give this tag to our power-up. And then let's go back to our, where was it? Yes, layer collision matrix. Oh wait, shit, hold on. Never mind. These aren't for tags. these are for layers, I forgot. A tag is useful too, but in this situation we need to create a new layer for our power up. Let's assign that. Then let's go back to our matrix. There it is. Now we need to make so our power up layer doesn't collide with our obstacle layer. We're gonna untick this. Then let's try again. We have a power up here. Let's see if our obstacles will collide with it. Nope. They phase through. Alright, we have our power-ups, but now what we need to do is code what we want when our player object touches the power-ups. For that, we need to go back to our player behavior script. In our onCollisionEnter methods, we need to create a new if statement, which will say if collision GameObject tag equals to PowerUp. We do this because we gave our PowerUp a tag and we want to use this. Now, here's the logic. I said earlier in the start of the video that the PowerUp effect should be temporary, within a certain amount of time. So, our player should touch the PowerUp, then have its effects for, let's say, 5 seconds, maybe 10, and then switch back to normal. We'll be able to do that by creating a timer. And to create a timer, we need to use a new method called a coroutine. Now, a coroutine in Unity is a method just like our onCollisionEnter methods or update and start methods, but our coroutines can pause in the middle, wait for something like a set amount of seconds, and then pick up where it's left off while the rest of the game continues playing. You'll understand better when I show an example. Right click, let's create an example. INumerator. Was that it? No. INumerator, then example coroutine. Our first line is going to be debug log, step 1. Then our second line is going to be yield return new, wait for seconds. That's not it. Wait for seconds 5. And then our third line is going to be debug log step 2. Now, here's how this works. When our example coroutine method is called, it will print out step 1 immediately. But then it will wait for 5 seconds, and then after those 5 seconds, our method will print out step 2. So to tie it back to our PowerUp, when our coroutine is called, we want it to first put the PowerUp effect on our player object, then wait for a certain amount of time, and then finally disable the PowerUp effect. So for this, let's create a new variable. Private bool is, I don't know, maybe something like is powered up. That's fine. So is powered up is false at the start of our game because we haven't picked any power ups yet. But when we pick a power up and our exam coroutine method is called, what we'll do first is toggle or bool variable. So we write is powered up equals to true. Then next we're gonna wait a couple of seconds. We're gonna wait for 10 seconds, and then we're gonna switch off or is powered up. We want to call this coroutine method whenever we touch a power up. So in this if statement, we're gonna call it. Then finally, our power up needs to have some effect. So we want to make it so when is powered up is true. I had something in mind, but now I realize that it won't work properly. So how about this? Give me a second. We'll give our player objects a layer, 2 layers specifically. One will be called player, plain and simple, and the other will be called player power up. Now going back to, how should I explain this? We want to make it so when our player object has the player layer, it can collide with our obstacles. However, on the other hand, if our obstacle is on the player power up layer, then it will phase through our obstacles. So we need to set that up by going back to our add matrix and finding player power up. Then disable its collisions with the obstacle layer. Going back to our script, we want to change the layer when the power up is active, and then at the end when the power up is turned off. We'll write game object layer mask named layer, and now we're gonna need to write the name of our layer, which is player power up. Then we're gonna do the same, but now to revert our player object to its player layer. If I'm not mistaken, that's all we need to do. So let's get back to our editor and try it out. We have our power up here. I hope this works. Nope, it isn't working. I think I will need to Google this one, because I don't know how to fix this. Okay. Let's see if this is gonna work now. Oh, there it is. Alright. Awesome. Now, is it gonna switch back on after 10 seconds? Yes, perfect. Now, here's the issue. When we're calling a regular method, we can just write its name, like we did here in the GameOver method and the updateLives method. But when we're working with coroutines, first we need to write start coroutine and then the name of the coroutine. So we wrote start coroutine and then PowerUp coroutine.